get a pop-up that we're going live. Okay. Okay, let us start. Chapter 43. A big crowd for chapter 43. So, chapter 43 is a unique chapter. It's short, and according to some, is also a continuation of the previous chapter. So it is somewhat connected, but it has its own uniquenesses. It's not clear at what point they split it up. Because all the commentaries consider it a separate chapter, but it seems from older writings of Tehillim, at one point it was one chapter, chapter 42 and 43. So the few lines on the top of the chapter, it says, a significant prayer concerning the magnitude of the troubles we have suffered at the hands of the impious nations, right? So the times that we are in Galus, in exile. May it be God's will to send Mashiach and Eliyahu, Navi, Elijah the prophet, who will lead us to the holy temple to offer sacrifices as in days of old. So as you remember last week, what did we talk about? We talked about the days of old, of the yearning for the days of old, even though David HaMelech didn't experience it, but it's something that he yearned for, meaning he saw that eventually the Jews will go into exile, and that they're going to yearn for a time going back to the Beis HaMikdash. So as we usually do, we're going to go through it once with a basic translation, and then another time with some commentary. So, Pasuk Aleph, Kapitel Mem Gimel 43, verse number 1, Shafteni Elikim. Shafteni really comes from the word judge me. So how does this come in? Judge me, God. V'riva rivi, because on the other hand, he is saying, riva rivi is the idea of taking care of my troubles. Riva rivi is the idea of fighting my fight. So first, on the one hand, judge me, and on the other hand, fight my fight. Migoy loy chassid. What fight? From a nation that is not pious. Chassid, today we use it as a group. We define certain people as chassidim, but the English translation of the word chassid means a pious person. The chassidim are called chassidim because they're pious, or at least we hope so. I hope that I'm a little pious. Me'ish mirma, so save me from nations that are not pious, and me'ish mirma, from a man of deceit, ve'avla, and iniquity. Avla is another word for sin, someone that does wrong, right? So save me from the person that is deceitful, and of that person that sins. And tefalteni, rescue me, save me. Pasuk Beis, Kiata Likimozi, because you are my God, Ma'uzmi, my strength. Lama zinachtani, why did you abandon me? Lama kaider es halech, why do I walk around in gloom? Like kaider, like almost a version of depression. Belachatz oyev, under the oppression or the pressure from the enemy. So Pasuk Gimel number 3, Shlach ercha v'amitcha, send your light, and v'amitcha from the word emes, send your truth. Hema yanchuni, those will guide me. Yiviyuni el arkadjecha, will bring me to your holy mountain, ve'el mishkaneisecha, and to your sanctuaries. Number 4, va'avaya, and then I will come, el mizbach elikim, to the altar, to the mizbeach, the altar of Hashem, el kel, to Hashem, to God. Simchas gili. Simcha is a certain type of joy. Gil is a certain type of joy, translated sometimes in English as delight, to the joy and to the delight. The oidcha bechinar, and I will praise you with a kinar. Kinar translated here as a lyre, but as a harp, right? I will praise you with a harp. Elikim, Elikai, God, my God. Matishtaicha chinafshi. My soul, why are you downcast? Umatemi alai, why are you crying? Put your hope in Hashem. Ki oidaydenu, you're soon gonna thank him. Yeshua's, for his deliverance. Panai, for his countenance. Ve'elokoi, my God. So this this capital is very short, but it's very powerful, and really it represents this idea of going out of exile, going out of galus, the representation of exile, and the idea of going out of exile, the idea of going out of galus. So let's go through it again with a little bit more commentary, with a little bit more explanation. As an introduction, the Meiri says that after the previous chapter, where David HaMelech describes the yearning that the Jew has in exile for a godly revelation. What's the godly revelation we're referring to? The godly revelation we're referring to is the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. The Jew that experienced that and is now in exile is yearning for that revelation. And so what is this capital? So that was previous chapter. What is this chapter? So in this chapter, he asks Hashem to take revenge of the nations and to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. So kind of a continuation. And similarly, the Sforno says that this chapter is talking about, it's a prayer for the redemption, a prayer for the Geula, and to get out of this galus, to get out of this exile. And with that, we'll go into chapter 43, verse number 1, pasuk number 1. So it says, Shafteni. So I translated before Shafteni as judge me. Rashi translates as lift me up. Shafteni Elikim, lift me up, God. And then he says, fight my fight, mi goy loy chasid, from a nation that is not pious. Rashi says that this nation is referring to the nation of Edom. This nation lived between two righteous nations and didn't learn from them, and didn't learn how to do the right thing, how to be righteous. And therefore, they're called the nation that is not pious, the impious nation. The Mitzuda says that Shafteni, instead of translating it, judge me, judge for me and fight my fight. That it's a continuation. The first two sentences, so to speak, are a continuation, meaning that there are those that are making trouble for me. So judge them for me, judge them on my behalf, and fight my fight. And so judge my judgments, and then it refers to a nation, an impious nation, and then it refers to meish, a person that is mirma va'avla, a deceitful person, meaning that there's both things. There's a nation and there's a person, a deceitful man, one person and a multitude of people. That's the way Metzudas explains it. The Radak says that Shoftei Elikim means that he's asking that Hashem take the revenge on my behalf, because I don't have the strength to fight. And the people who fight me are not righteous. Meaning, David HaMelech very often says that I understand why I've suffered. And we've had it quite a few times that he mentions so far, that I suffer because of my sins. So why over here, when a nation is bothering him, doesn't he come and say, okay, they're bothering me, it's probably punishment for something that I've done, right? They're probably right, they're probably correct for what they're doing against me. But David HaMelech doesn't say this. Why? And he explains, because they're a goy loy chasid. They're a nation that is not pious. They can't be doing it for the right reasons. They can't be doing it for the proper reasons. They are doing it just to bother me, meaning they're doing it not for proper reasons, not righteous reasons. And that's the difference. If David HaMelech believed that it was, something, a punishment or something that came from Hashem, he would accept it, something to cleanse himself from the sins, he would accept it. But here it's coming from a nation, that is not pious, so obviously they do not have good intentions. And then that continues, says, and then it talks about a nation, and then it talks about a person, meish mirma, from a deceitful person. So he says that since a nation is comprised of many individuals, so recognize that there's a nation that goes against David HaMelech, but there's also many individuals within that nation that goes against David HaMelech. And the Ibn Ezra, on that note, he says that one way that ish could be a part of the multitude, but also he says it could be that it's talking about the leader. It could be it's talking about the king. So there's the goy loy chasid, the nation that is not pious, and then there's the ish, their leader, that is deceitful, right? That they're not pious, and it all starts from the top, from their leader that is deceitful. Mi ish mirma. Svarnu says that the nation that when it says Migoy loy chassid, an impious nation. It's referring to a nation that shows outwardly how they flaunt as if they are pious, but really they are not righteous at all. Imam Loy says, when it says goy loy chassid, it's interesting that it says two things. It says in the first half of the pasuk, Hashem, help me fight a fight against a nation that is not pious. And then, and the Imam Loy makes a distinction, it says, may ish mirma, but from a deceitful person, rescue me. That's not a fight. You don't get involved with a deceitful person. Someone that plays trickery, you don't even go to war. Say, someone that's playing by the rules, so to speak, you could have a dealing with. You could try to work things out. You could try even to go to war with. But someone that's deceitful like that, you have to be very careful, and you have to ask Hashem for his help, not to win the war, but to rescue you. And it's very interesting how the Imam Loy just splits up the pasuk in that kind of way. That's pasuk number one. Pasuk number two, Hashem, you're my strength. Why you let me? Why? So the Mitzvah says Zenachtani. What does it mean to Zenachtani? We usually translate Zenachtani that he's asking Hashem, why did you abandon me? Over here, the Mitzvah says that David HaMelech is saying that I feel like I'm walking in the dark. I feel like I'm grappling in the dark, and I am lost. Sfarnu says, when it says Ma'uzi, when it says that Hashem, you are my strength, that he's saying that you are my strength in the past. You have helped me in the past. You have been there for me in the past. So Lama Zenachtani, why are you abandoning me today? And that is pasuk number 2. Pasuk number 3. So what does he say? Send your light. Va'amitcha, from the word emes, truth. Send me your light and your truth, and they'll guide me. So what's the simple pshat of that? The simple pshat is that the light of Hashem and Hashem's attribute of truth, of emes, that will guide anybody who's looking for truth. Look for Hashem's truth. Look for Hashem's light, and you'll be guided in a proper manner. Right? So that's shlach ercha va'amitcha. That's a simple pshat. Though Rashi comes over here and he translates it relatively different, and he says shlach ercha. When King David over here says send your light, he's referring to Mashiach. So he says shlach ercha, send Mashiach. The Rebbe has a whole sikha on this. Why does Rashi go away from the pshat over here? But not for now. But the Mashiach represents light. Mashiach represents, we live through a world of darkness. There's so much bad things that go on. Mashiach represents goodness and light. And shlach ercha, as Rashi explains over here, David HaMelech is asking, David HaMelech is praying, Hashem, please send Mashiach. The Mitzvah says that it's asking to light up a path and to fulfill the promise of bringing King David to the mountain so that he can to build the holy temple. And that's send the light and the truth to the holy mountain, which is part also of Pasuk Gimel, the third Pasuk, Yiviyoni ala Kadshecha, show me with your light, you'll show me the path to get to your holy mountain. The Even Ezra says that when he says shlach ercha va'amitcha, he's asking for two things. He's asking for light and he's asking for truth. What's light and what's truth? So if you look in previous psukim, we said that eshalech, that lama kaider eshalech. Why do I go around in gloom, depression? What do you need for depression? You need light. You need something, a light to turn on. You need to recognize some good around you, right? So that's why. So the Even Ezra says that's what he's asking for, light against the koider, against the gloom. And when he asks for truth, truth is versus the ish mirma, versus the man of deceit, the deceitful person. That's why he's asking for light and truth, light for himself and truth to fight, be able to be rescued from the deceitful person. Sfarnu says, again, as Rashi says, shlach ercha, light is Mashiach. Va'amitcha, though, he says, is referring to Eliyahu Navi, that will show us the truth in Torah. I don't know if you ever came across a word in the Talmud, and the word is teiku. Teiku is when there's a big question in the Talmud, and they didn't have the answer. The sages didn't have the answer, and the word is teiku. To the extent that in modern Israeli slang, they even use that word teiku today. They use that word, that if there's something like, you're stuck and there's no answer, etc., they say teiku. It's an Aramaic word. But it's also an acronym. And if you take the words tough, the letters Taf Yud Kuf Vav Tishbi Yetaretz Kushis Vabayis, that Tishbi is referring to Eliyahu Hanavi, that some of these questions we don't have an answer until Eliyahu Hanavi comes. And there's other versions of Yehimbuna Chachi of Eliyahu. There's different versions of different things that we wait for Elijah the prophet. What does it mean to wait for Elijah the prophet? It means to wait for Mashiach. Elijah the prophet is the one who's going to come and announce Mashiach. So since there is certain truths of Torah that we are unaware of, and we're waiting for Mashiach to come, we're waiting for Eliyahu Hanavi to come in order to illuminate those truths. So therefore, the Sfarnu says that he says Shlach Archa, referring to Mashiach. Together with Mashiach comes Eliyahu Hanavi, and Eliyahu Hanavi will show the truth, the Amitcha, the Emes, the truth within Torah. Pasuk number 4, Pasuk Daled. And then he says, then I will come to the altar of Hashem, to Hashem, El Kel, to Hashem, Simchas Gili, the two versions of joy. So Rashi says that when it says El Kel, to Hashem, Simchas Gili, the joy and the delight. So Rashi says that it's a continuation. To Hashem, El Kel, to Hashem, who is my joy and delight. And that was King David, that he found joy and delight in his service of Hashem. The Mitzvah says that on a similar vein, El Kel to Hashem, because Hashem makes me happy. Hashem is my joy. Hashem is the one who makes me happy. I know that my happiness and my joy only comes from Hashem. It's not something that, if I get a new car, I'll be happy. No, it comes from deeper. It comes from Hashem. My joy and my happiness comes from Hashem. The Radak says that at the end of the pasuk it says "Va'itcha bekinar," and I will praise you with a lyre. I'll praise you with a harp. Right. So what's he referring to? As we mentioned, according to some commentaries, and the Radak is one of them, it says that it is a continuation of the previous chapter. And the previous chapter is talking about the Jew in exile reminiscing and remembering and yearning for the good old times before he went into exile, when they would go to the Holy Temple. So similarly over here, talking about praising Hashem with a harp, with a lyre, that is the way that they praise Hashem in the Holy Temple. That's what that is reminiscing and yearning for. And everyone will recognize that Hashem hasn't abandoned this Jew, that even though they say Lamas and Achtani, people say, why does Hashem abandon? But once we'll be able to go back to the Mizbeach of Hashem, everybody will recognize that Hashem hasn't abandoned the Jewish people. The Yavet says that, it says over here, that we're going to have joy and delight. Can you imagine joy and delight going on together? Joy and delight is it's two versions of it's two versions of joy. And the Avet, the Avet says that when in Golos we have a limited revelation of spirituality, we have a limited revelation of godliness, we have limited revelation of happiness, of joy, in this kind of way. But when Mashiach comes, we're going to have a flow of happiness, and that's why it says Simchas Gili, both the happiness and the joy, the joy and the delight. There'll be a rush of joy that we never experienced before, and that is a lot of celebrating all at one time, and that is the idea of joy when Mashiach comes. The Avetz also says that there's another pasuk, if I remember correctly, it's in Tehillim. It says, "Eich noshir shir Hashem al admas neichar." How are we gonna sing the song of God al admas neichar, on foreign land? Meaning that it's not the same when we sing to Hashem, when we praise Hashem on foreign land. And therefore, we're waiting for the kinar, the oitcha bekinar. We're waiting to celebrate and to praise Hashem with a kinar, with a harp. But we're in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Holy Temple. Verse number 5, the final verse. So, if you recognize this verse, you should recognize this verse because we had it twice in the previous chapter. My soul, why are you downcast? Why are you crying? Put your trust in Hashem. Don't worry, it's still going to come. His deliverance, His countenance, my Hashem. So again, this is, as the Mitzvah says, and as we mentioned last week, this is this Jew telling his neshama, relax, don't worry. Yes, we're going through a hard time, But don't worry, Hashem is still with us over here, and He will help us and get us out of this galus. It's and it's a comfort, so to speak, that He's trying to bring to His neshama. The Svarnu says that Hashem will ultimately take up our fight. That even if there's still the anti-Semite out there and still fighting us, Hashem will ultimately take up our fight. He didn't take it up yet. He will take it up. There's still time. Wait and see. He's still going to come and take up our fight. The Radak says that even though he doesn't, the question that is that the Radak asks this question. He says, this pasuk says, my soul, why are you downcast? Who said, did we see anywhere in this chapter that the soul is downcast? There was no mention of that in this chapter about a soul being downcast, right? So Radak says, this is because this chapter, as we mentioned in the beginning, this chapter is really connected with the previous chapter. And since it is connected with the previous chapter, there was comments in chapter 42 where the soul is downcast. So this is a continuation of, and a similar verse as we had in the previous chapter of this Jew telling his soul, don't worry, don't be downcast. And this idea that Mashiach is coming, Hashem will still is going to help. That's what the Radak. Now, the Rebbe has a sikha and talks about this last two verses, but primarily the last verse. And the Rebbe says that a person in Golus, a person in exile, he could ask, if you look at history throughout the last 2,000 years since the Jewish people are in exile, what's going to change? How could it be that all of a sudden Mashiach's going to come and all of a sudden we're going to see Hashem's countenance? We're going to see Hashem's deliverance. Like, how is that going to happen? All of a sudden, and that's meaning we suffered so much and we're still suffering. So what, all of a sudden just things are going to snap and everything's going to change? So the answer is yes. But David HaMelech here comes and says, and he answers, he says, don't ask too many questions. Yeah, there's questions, there's comments, there's things that are not understood. Don't ask so many questions. Put your trust in Hashem. After you put trust in Hashem, then we could discuss it, because there's what to discuss. But first put your trust in Hashem. And if you put your trust in Hashem, don't worry, we will go to the Beis HaMikdash, we will go with the Kinar, and we will sing and praise in front of Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash. May it be today. And with that, we finish one of the shortest chapters